The fluorescent lights in the conference room seemed to flicker with mockery as I stared at my laptop screen in disbelief. My quarterly presentation, the one I'd spent 3 weeks perfecting, was completely corrupted. Every slide showed garbled text, missing charts, and images that had somehow been replaced with random stock photos of cats. The senior partners would be walking through that door in exactly 12 minutes, and I was looking at professional suicide. My hands trembled as I frantically clicked through each slide, hoping against hope that somehow one section had survived whatever digital catastrophe had befallen my work. Nothing. 27 slides of pure gibberish. I could feel sweat beading on my forehead despite the aggressive air conditioning. Before I share this shocking experience, please show your support with a like and subscribe. Comment your location below. My name is Rebecca Cox. I'm 53 years old, and I've been working in corporate consulting for over 2 decades. I've weathered office politics, budget cuts, and countless demanding clients. But nothing had prepared me for what was happening to me now. This wasn't the first time my presentations had mysteriously malfunctioned at critical moments. Technical difficulties again, Rebecca? The voice behind me dripped with false sympathy. I turned to see Marcus Wellington, my coworker of 5 years, standing in the doorway with his perfectly organized presentation folder tucked under his arm. His smile was all teeth and no warmth. At 38, Marcus had joined our consulting firm with impressive credentials and an even more impressive ability to make everyone else look incompetent by comparison. "It's the strangest thing," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "Everything was perfect when I saved it last night." Marcus stepped closer, peering at my screen with theatrical concern. "Oh my, that does look problematic. You know, I've always told you that cloud storage is unreliable. I keep all my important files on multiple backup drives." He patted his briefcase with obvious satisfaction. "Perhaps I should take the lead today? I did prepare some additional slides, just in case." Just in case. Those 3 words hit me like ice water. Marcus always seemed to have backup plans when my technology failed, which had been happening with alarming frequency over the past 6 months. First, it was my microphone cutting out during the Henderson client pitch, then my laptop mysteriously dying during the quarterly review. Each time, Marcus had swooped in like a hero, saving the day with his impeccable preparation and technical competence. The conference room door opened, and my heart sank as the senior partners filed in. Mr. Davidson, our managing partner, checked his watch with the precision of a man who valued punctuality above all else. Behind him, Mrs. Chen and Mr. Rodriguez took their seats, expectant faces turned toward the front of the room where I stood frozen in my personal nightmare. "Rebecca, we're eager to see your analysis of the Morrison account," Mr. Davidson announced, settling into his chair. "Marcus mentioned you've been working on some innovative approaches." I caught the slight smirk that flickered across Marcus's face before he arranged his features into an expression of professional concern. That look sent a chill down my spine because I recognized it now, after months of these inexplicable failures. It wasn't surprise or sympathy. It was anticipation. "I'm afraid Rebecca is experiencing some technical difficulties," Marcus said smoothly, rising from his chair. "But fortunately, I took the liberty of preparing some supplementary materials that might help us move forward productively." The way he emphasized productively felt like a slap. I watched helplessly as he connected his laptop to the projector, his movements confident and rehearsed. Within seconds, a polished presentation filled the screen, complete with detailed charts and analysis of the Morrison account. My analysis, the same innovative approaches I'd been developing, presented with Marcus's name in the corner of each slide. My chest tightened as I recognized my own work, my own insights, being delivered with Marcus's smooth confidence. The senior partners nodded approvingly, taking notes as he outlined strategies I'd spent weeks developing. This wasn't just technical sabotage. This was theft, plain and simple. "Excellent work, Marcus," Mrs. Chen commented, her praise cutting through me like a blade. "This level of preparation and innovation is exactly what we need for the Morrison expansion." I wanted to scream, to point out that these were my ideas, my weeks of research and analysis. But what proof did I have? My corrupted files? My history of technical failures? I looked like exactly what Marcus wanted me to look like. An older employee who couldn't keep up with modern technology, consistently unprepared and unreliable. After the meeting ended and the partners filed out, showering Marcus with congratulations, I sat alone in the empty conference room, staring at my reflection in the blank projection screen. The woman looking back at me appeared defeated, aged beyond her years by betrayal and frustration. That evening, I drove home to our quiet suburban neighborhood, my mind churning with the events of the day. The familiar sight of our modest two-story house usually brought me comfort, but tonight, even home felt uncertain. I needed to talk to someone, needed to voice the suspicions that were crystallizing into cold certainty. I found my husband David Cox in his study, grading papers with the methodical attention he brought to everything. At 57, David had been teaching high school literature for over 30 years, and his steady presence had always been my anchor through workplace storms. His graying beard and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses looked up as I entered, immediately recognizing my distress. "Another presentation disaster?" he asked gently, setting down his red pen. "David, I think Marcus is sabotaging me." The words tumbled out before I could stop them, sounding almost paranoid in the quiet room lined with classic literature. David leaned back in his chair, his expression growing serious. "Tell me what happened today." As I recounted the morning's events, I watched my husband's face shift from concern to anger. David might be mild-mannered in the classroom, but he had a fierce, protective streak when it came to fairness and justice. When I described seeing my own analysis presented under Marcus's name, David's jaw tightened. "Rebecca, this has gone beyond coincidence," he said firmly. 6 months of technical failures, always at crucial moments, with Marcus perfectly positioned to step in? That's not bad luck. "But how could he be doing it? And why?" I sank into the chair across from his desk, feeling the weight of months of self-doubt. "The how we can figure out," David said, his teacher's analytical mind already working. "The why seems obvious. He wants your position, your reputation, your clients. You've built something valuable over 20 years, and he's trying to take it." The next morning, I arrived at work early, hoping to catch up on the Morrison account materials before Marcus arrived. But as I settled at my desk with my coffee, I spotted him across the office, already deep in conversation with Sarah Mitchell, our IT coordinator. Sarah had been my lifeline through many technical crises, a 29-year-old computer genius who could solve any digital problem with remarkable patience. I watched Marcus lean against Sarah's desk, his posture casual and friendly. She laughed at something he said, her auburn hair catching the morning light as she nodded enthusiastically. Something about their interaction made my stomach clench with unease. Sarah had access to everyone's files, everyone's systems. She'd helped me countless times when my technology failed, always appearing within minutes of my frantic help desk calls. "Rebecca!" Sarah called out, waving me over with her usual bright smile. "I was just telling Marcus about the new backup protocols we're implementing. After all your recent issues, I want to make sure you're fully protected." Marcus straightened, his expression shifting to one of professional concern. Sarah was explaining how easy it can be for files to become corrupted, especially when people don't follow proper procedures. It's quite fascinating, really, how fragile our digital systems can be. There was something in his tone, a subtle emphasis on fascinating, that made my skin crawl. I studied Sarah's face, searching for any sign of complicity, but saw only genuine helpfulness and technical enthusiasm. "I've been thinking about your presentation issues," Sarah continued, pulling up something on her screen. "I ran a diagnostic on your system last night, and there are some interesting patterns in the corruption. It's almost like someone with administrative access had been making changes to your files." My heart started racing. Administrative access? Who has that? "Well, the IT department, obviously, a few senior partners, and—" Sarah's voice trailed off as she glanced at Marcus, her expression suddenly uncertain. "And consultants with level 7 clearance," Marcus finished smoothly. "Which includes both Rebecca and myself, of course. We need that access to handle sensitive client data." But I had never heard of level 7 clearance, and from the flicker of confusion in Sarah's eyes, something wasn't adding up. Marcus's explanation was smooth, practiced, but it felt rehearsed in a way that made my suspicions crystallize into certainty. That afternoon, I called my sister-in-law, Jennifer Cox, during my lunch break. Jennifer worked in corporate security for a tech company downtown, and her expertise in digital forensics had helped several friends expose workplace fraud over the years. At 45, she had David's same analytical mind, but with a sharper edge honed by years of corporate investigations. "Rebecca, what you're describing sounds like a systematic campaign," Jennifer said after I'd explained the pattern of failures. "Someone with technical knowledge could absolutely manipulate your files, especially if they had help from someone in IT. But Sarah seems so helpful. She's always been the one to fix my problems." "Think about it." Jennifer's voice was gentle but firm. "Who better to sabotage your systems than the person responsible for maintaining them? And who would be above suspicion when she shows up to help after each disaster?" The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Marcus and Sarah working together to systematically destroy my reputation while positioning him as the reliable alternative. It was sophisticated, calculated, and absolutely devastating in its effectiveness. And that's when the pattern snapped into place. That evening, I sat in my home office staring at my laptop screen, Jennifer's words echoing in my mind. But something still felt off about the whole Sarah theory. I decided to do some digging of my own before jumping to conclusions. I pulled up my company's internal directory and started cross-referencing access logs that I could see from my account. What I found made my blood run cold, but not for the reasons I expected. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Working late again? Dinner's getting cold." I trudged downstairs to find him setting aside his own plate, concern etched across his face. "You've barely eaten this week, Rebecca." "This situation is consuming you." "I think I know who's been sabotaging me," I said, sliding into my chair at the kitchen table. "But David, it's worse than I thought. I found something in the system logs tonight." David leaned forward, his fork halfway to his mouth. "What kind of something?" "Access records showing someone logged into my files using Marcus's credentials, but the timestamps don't match his schedule. He was in client meetings during most of these incidents. So either he's lying about his whereabouts, or someone else is using his access codes." I pushed food around my plate, my appetite completely gone. "Which means Marcus might not be the mastermind here. He might be another victim." David set down his fork entirely. "Rebecca, if someone has been using Marcus's credentials to frame him while sabotaging you, that's a whole different level of manipulation." The next morning, I arrived at work early, hoping to catch Marcus before the office got busy. I found him in the break room, looking as tired as I felt, staring into a cup of coffee like it held answers to the universe. "Marcus, we need to talk," I said, closing the door behind me. He looked up, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something other than smugness in his expression. He looked worried, maybe even scared. "Rebecca, I was hoping to talk to you too. Something strange happened yesterday afternoon. Sarah mentioned that IT flagged unusual activity on my account. Files being accessed when I wasn't even at my desk." I studied his face carefully. Either he was an exceptional actor, or he was genuinely confused. "What kind of files?" "Client presentations, system configurations, and..." He paused, meeting my eyes directly. "Your project files." "Rebecca, I swear to you, I never accessed your work. Why would I even need to?" There was something in his voice, a sincerity I hadn't heard before. "Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Do you have level 7 clearance?" His brow furrowed. "Level 7 clearance? Rebecca, there's no such thing in our system. Our highest clearance level is 5, and only senior partners have that. I have level 3 access, same as you." The pieces of the puzzle shifted again, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Sarah told me you had level 7 clearance. She said it was necessary for handling sensitive client data." Marcus's face went pale. "Sarah said what? Rebecca, that doesn't exist. And if she told you I had access levels that don't exist..." He trailed off, the implications sinking in for both of us. "Then she's been playing us against each other," I finished. "Making me think you were the one with special access, making you look suspicious by using your credentials." Marcus ran his hands through his hair. "This is insane. Why would Sarah want to sabotage both of us?" Before I could answer, the break room door opened, and Sarah walked in with her usual bright smile. "Good morning, you two. Rebecca, I have great news about your presentation software. I think I found the root cause of all your problems." I looked at Marcus, seeing my own suspicion reflected in his eyes. "Really? What did you find, Sarah?" "Well, it turns out there was some malicious code embedded in your system. Probably from that phishing email you clicked on a few months ago." Sarah's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "The good news is, I can clean it all up. Just need you to give me your login credentials so I can run a deep system purge." Marcus and I exchanged a look. I had never clicked on any phishing email, and from Marcus's expression, he knew it too. "That's very thorough of you, Sarah," I said carefully, "but I don't remember clicking on any suspicious emails." "Oh, these things happen so quickly, people rarely remember," Sarah said, her tone still friendly, but with an edge I'd never noticed before. "Memory can be so unreliable, especially when you're under stress. Speaking of which, Marcus, I'll need your credentials too. The malware seems to have spread to accounts that accessed Rebecca's files." The break room felt suddenly smaller, the air thick with tension. Sarah stood between us and the door, still smiling that same helpful smile, but now it looked predatory. And that's when I realized we weren't just dealing with workplace sabotage. We were dealing with something much more dangerous. Marcus stepped slightly closer to me, and I could feel the protective energy radiating from him. The dynamic in the room had shifted completely. Sarah was no longer our helpful IT colleague. She was something else entirely. "Sarah," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I think we need to involve IT security in this. If there's really malware, shouldn't they handle it?" Sarah's smile flickered for just a moment. "Oh, that's not necessary. I am IT security for our department. Besides, involving more people just complicates things unnecessarily. We can handle this quietly, between friends." Friends. The word felt hollow coming from her lips now. I thought about all the times she'd offered to help, all the late nights she'd stayed to fix problems that kept mysteriously appearing. How had I been so blind? "You know what's interesting?" Marcus said, his voice taking on that analytical tone I'd learned to recognize. "Rebecca's presentation problems only started after you began helping her with the technical setup." Sarah turned that bright smile on Marcus. "Correlation isn't causation, Marcus. I thought someone with your background would understand basic logic." There was a subtle condescension in her tone that I'd never noticed before, or maybe I'd dismissed it as professional confidence. Now it sounded different, sharper, more calculating. "My background?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What exactly do you mean by that?" "Well, you're not exactly from here originally, are you? Different work cultures, different standards." Sarah's mask was slipping, revealing something ugly underneath. "Some people have to work twice as hard to prove they belong." The comment hit like a physical blow. I saw Marcus's jaw tighten, and suddenly all those little interactions I'd witnessed between them took on a different meaning. The way Sarah would speak slowly to Marcus as if he might not understand. The way she'd redirect technical questions away from him in meetings. The subtle implications that maybe he wasn't quite qualified for his position. "That's enough," I said, my voice harder than I'd intended. "Marcus is one of the most competent people in this company, and frankly, he's been more help to me in the last hour than you've been in months." Sarah's expression darkened. "Rebecca, you're clearly under a lot of stress, making rash judgments, seeing conspiracies where none exist. Maybe you should consider taking some time off. Mental health is so important, and honestly, your performance lately has been concerning." The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that for a split second, I felt that familiar doubt creep in. Was I being paranoid? Was I making this all up in my head? Then Marcus spoke up. "Actually, Sarah, I've been reviewing the system logs. Funny thing, most of Rebecca's technical issues seem to trace back to remote access sessions from your workstation." Sarah's composure cracked visibly. "That's impossible. You don't have access to those logs." "I didn't," Marcus admitted. "But Rebecca gave me her login this morning, and I've been doing some digging. Turns out, you've been remotely accessing her computer during presentations, haven't you? Killing processes, corrupting files, making it look like user error." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah stood frozen, her helpful mask completely gone now, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Why?" I asked, genuinely bewildered. "Why would you do this to me? I thought we were friends." Sarah laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Friends? Rebecca, you have no idea how exhausting it is to watch everyone fawn over your work while doing half the effort. Do you know how many times I've had to smile and nod while clients praised your presentations? Presentations that I fixed, that I made possible? But you were sabotaging them," Marcus pointed out. "I was creating problems and then solving them," Sarah snapped, "making myself indispensable, except Rebecca never seemed to appreciate it properly, never gave me the credit I deserved. And then she started suspecting you, Marcus, which was just perfect. 2 birds, 1 stone." The calculation behind it all was breathtaking. She hadn't just been sabotaging my work. She'd been orchestrating an elaborate scheme to destroy both Marcus and me while positioning herself as the hero. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. Sarah shrugged, as if we were discussing the weather. "Months. Almost from the day you started getting recognition for the Morrison account. It should have been my project, but they gave it to the Golden Girl instead." I felt sick. All those times I doubted myself. All the stress, the sleepless nights wondering what I was doing wrong. It had all been deliberate. Marcus moved closer to the door. We need to report this to HR immediately. With what proof? Sarah's confidence was returning. Some system logs that could be explained away? Marcus's word against mine? And really, who do you think they'll believe? The helpful team player who's been here for 5 years? Or the woman who's been having mysterious technical problems and the suspicious colleague she suddenly decided to trust? The worst part was, she had a point. It would be our word against hers, and she'd been very careful to build her reputation as the helpful, competent one. But then I remembered something. The presentation today, I said slowly. The Morrison client meeting. You knew I was going to suggest postponing it, didn't you? Sarah's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? This morning, before I even spoke to you, you had already prepared that whole story about finding a solution. You knew exactly what problems I'd be having because you planned them. I felt the pieces clicking together. But here's what I think you didn't count on. I recorded everything this morning. The whole conversation about Level 7 clearance, about Marcus having special access, all of it. It was a bluff, but Sarah's face went white. You're lying. Am I? I pulled out my phone. New company policy, remember? Record all technical troubleshooting sessions for security purposes. You helped write that policy, didn't you? Marcus caught on immediately. And I recorded our conversation too. The one where we figured out she'd been lying to both of us. Sarah looked between us, her careful composure finally cracking completely. You have no idea what you're dealing with, she said, her voice low and dangerous. This is so much bigger than just office politics. Before either of us could ask what she meant, the break room lights went out. In the darkness, I heard Sarah's voice, now completely transformed from the helpful colleague I thought I knew. Some secrets are worth killing for. The emergency lighting kicked in a few seconds later, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Sarah was gone. Did she just threaten to kill us? Marcus whispered, his voice shaking. I was already moving toward the door, my heart pounding. We need to get out of here, now. The hallway was empty, lit only by the red emergency bulbs every 20 feet. Our footsteps echoed as we hurried toward the elevator bank. The elevators won't work with the power out, Marcus said. Stairs then. I pushed open the heavy door to the stairwell. My car's in the garage. We can call the police from there. As we started down the concrete steps, I heard a door slam somewhere above us. Sarah's voice carried down the stairwell, no longer the helpful colleague, but something cold and calculating. You really shouldn't have gotten involved, Marcus. And you, her voice got closer. You should have just accepted being mediocre. We picked up our pace, taking the stairs 2 at a time. 3 floors down, 2 floors, 1 floor. What did she mean about secrets worth killing for? Marcus panted as we reached the parking garage level. I don't know, but I don't want to find out. I fumbled for my keys as we burst through the door into the dimly lit garage. The garage felt like a maze in the emergency lighting. Every shadow could be hiding Sarah. Every sound echoed off the concrete walls. We made it to my car, and I was jamming the key into the lock when Marcus grabbed my arm. Wait, look at your tires. All 4 tires were flat. Not just flat, slashed. She's been planning this, I said, the full scope of what we were dealing with finally hitting me. This isn't just about presentations or office politics. A slow clap echoed through the garage. Sarah stepped out from behind a concrete pillar about 30 feet away. In the red emergency lighting, she looked like a different person entirely. Very good. Yes, I've been planning this for months. Do you want to know what the Morrison account really is? Sarah, just stop, Marcus said, positioning himself slightly in front of me. "Whatever this is about, we can work it out." She laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. "Work it out? You have no idea what Morrison Industries actually does, do you? What they're paying our company to help them cover up?" I thought about the Morrison account, the one that had supposedly made my career. Environmental consulting for their new manufacturing plant. Routine compliance work. Those environmental impact reports you've been so proud of writing? They're complete fiction. Morrison has been dumping industrial waste into the water supply for 3 years. Your reports are helping them avoid EPA investigations. The words hit me like a physical blow. That's impossible. I ran all the tests myself. With data I provided you. Beautiful, clean data that I created. Sarah started walking closer. Morrison pays our company $5 million a year to keep their secrets, and they pay me directly to make sure nothing goes wrong. Marcus stepped forward. You're talking about poisoning people, families, children. I'm talking about $30 million over the next 6 years. Money that keeps this company profitable and keeps all of our jobs secure. Sarah's voice was matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing quarterly budgets. But you two had to go and figure out how I work. Now you're a liability. We haven't figured out anything about Morrison, I said, trying to buy time while looking for another way out of the garage. We only knew about the presentation sabotage. But you're smart. Too smart. Eventually, you would have started looking deeper into the account data. You would have asked the right questions. She was only 15 feet away now, and I could see she had something in her hand. Not a weapon exactly, but a small device I didn't recognize. "Sarah, think about what you're doing," Marcus said. "Even if you stop us, other people will figure it out eventually." "No, they won't, because there won't be any evidence left to find." She held up the device. "This little thing is going to cause a very unfortunate gas leak in the building's main line. Tragic explosion. 3 dedicated employees working late, trying to solve a technical problem that unfortunately caused a catastrophic system failure." The scope of her planning was terrifying. "You've done this before. Remember Janet from accounting? The one who supposedly had that car accident last month?" Sarah's smile was chilling. She was getting too curious about some of the Morrison invoices. My blood went cold. Janet had been asking me about environmental regulations just a week before her accident. I'd thought she was just being thorough. "You're insane," Marcus whispered. "I'm practical. And unfortunately for both of you, you've become impractical problems that need practical solutions." Sarah pressed a button on the device. Somewhere in the building above us, I heard a faint hissing sound. "Gas moves quickly through ventilation systems," she said conversationally. "We have maybe 10 minutes before the concentration reaches combustible levels. Of course, we won't be here to see it." But as she turned to leave, Marcus did something completely unexpected. He pulled out his phone and held it up. "Live stream," he said simply. "Everything you just said, broadcasting to my personal social media accounts." Sarah's face went white. "You're bluffing. There's no cell signal in the garage." "Emergency network. Company policy requires backup communication systems in all parking structures." Marcus was backing toward the stairwell door, pulling me with him. "Funny thing about company policies, sometimes they actually work in your favor." For the first time since this nightmare began, Sarah looked genuinely panicked. "Turn it off. Turn it off right now." "Can't do that. It's already out there. And you know how social media works. Screenshots, downloads, shares. Even if I deleted it now, it's too late." Sarah raised the device again, and I realized with horror that she had a backup plan. "Then we'll all go down together." The acrid smell of gas was getting stronger, and I could feel panic clawing at my throat. Sarah stood between us and the only exit, her finger hovering over what I now realized was a remote detonator. "You think you're so clever with your live stream," she said to Marcus, her voice taking on a manic edge. "But dead people can't testify, and accidents happen all the time in old buildings like this." Marcus kept his phone raised, the small red recording light still blinking. "Sarah, there are hundreds of people watching this right now. Comments are pouring in. Someone's already called the fire department." I watched Sarah's face cycle through emotions: rage, calculation, desperation. The woman who had systematically destroyed my presentations, who had murdered Janet, was now cornered like a rabid animal. "The gas concentration isn't high enough yet," I said suddenly, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "You need a specific mixture for combustion. Too little oxygen, and it won't ignite properly." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "Environmental safety training. You know, the thing you've been trying to discredit me about for months." I took a small step forward. "You opened the valve maybe 3 minutes ago. In a space this size, with these ventilation patterns, you need at least 15 minutes to reach optimal levels, and that's assuming you calculated the flow rate correctly." "You're lying." "Am I? You want to test it?" I gestured toward the detonator. "Go ahead. Press the button. See what happens when you try to ignite an improper mixture in a concrete structure with multiple air currents." For the first time since this nightmare began, doubt flickered across Sarah's face. I pressed my advantage. "You know what happens with an incomplete combustion in an enclosed space? The explosion is weak, but the carbon monoxide production spikes. We might survive the blast, but then we'd have plenty of time to suffer through slow asphyxiation. Is that really how you want to go out? Gasping for air while your live stream confession plays on repeat across the internet?" Marcus caught on to what I was doing. "The comments section is brutal, Sarah. People are screenshotting everything. Your confession about Janet, the Morrison account, all of it. Your face is everywhere now." Sarah's hand began to shake. "Shut up! Just shut up!" "Even if you kill us, it won't matter," I continued, taking another careful step. "The data we found is already backed up. Marcus sent copies to the cloud before we came down here. And now that your confession is public, every investigator in the state will be crawling through Morrison's books." I said, "Shut up!" Sarah raised the detonator above her head like she was going to throw it. That's when I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Footsteps echoing down the stairwell behind us. Multiple sets of footsteps moving fast. "Fire department!" a voice shouted. "We have reports of a gas leak." Sarah's face went through a series of expressions so quickly I could barely track them. Then, with a sound that was half scream and half sob, she hurled the detonator against the concrete wall. It shattered into pieces, and in that moment, I realized we might actually survive this. But as the first firefighter rounded the corner, Sarah pulled something else from her pocket. Something that made my blood freeze. A second detonator. "If I'm going down," she whispered, "I'm taking everyone with me." The concrete walls seemed to close in around us as Sarah held up the second detonator, her finger poised over the trigger. The acrid smell of gas was getting stronger, and I could hear more footsteps echoing down the stairwell. My mind raced, trying to process how we'd gone from a simple confrontation to this nightmare scenario. "Sarah, listen to me," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady despite the terror clawing at my chest. "Those people coming down here, they're just doing their jobs. They don't deserve to die for what's between us." Her laugh was hollow, brittle. "Like Janet deserved to die? She was just doing her job too, wasn't she? following up on those safety violations I planted in your reports." Marcus stepped slightly forward, his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. "We can work this out. The live stream is still running. Everyone watching can see you're not a killer. Don't become one now." "I already am one." Sarah's voice cracked, and for a moment I saw past the rage to the broken person underneath. "I pushed her down those stairs because she was going to expose everything. The forged documents, the bribes from Morrison Construction, all of it. 20 years of my career built on lies, and she was going to destroy it with her stupid integrity." The footsteps were getting closer. I estimated maybe 30 seconds before the first responders reached our level. My environmental training kicked in automatically. The gas concentration was definitely building, but Sarah was right about one thing. In this confined space, with this much concrete and steel around us, the explosion would be devastating. "Your career doesn't have to end like this?" I said desperately. "Yes, you made terrible choices, but you can still do the right thing. Let these people live." Sarah's eyes were wild now, darting between Marcus, me, and the stairwell entrance. "The right thing? You want to know about the right thing?" I spent 2 decades watching mediocre men get promoted while I did twice the work for half the credit. When Morrison approached me about those safety shortcuts, I thought finally, I could get ahead. "So you framed me," I said, pieces still clicking into place. "Made it look like I was the one cutting corners on environmental assessments." "You were so perfect," she spat. "So thorough with your reports, so dedicated to proper protocols. It made you the perfect fall guy. If the Golden Girl was cutting corners, who would question it?" The first firefighter appeared at the entrance to our level, his heavy gear clanking as he moved. Behind him, I could see at least 2 others. Sarah raised the detonator higher. "Stop right there!" she screamed. "One more step, and I blow us all to hell!" The lead firefighter froze, his face barely visible behind his protective mask. I could see his eyes assessing the situation. The smell of gas, the woman with the detonator, the 2 of us caught in the middle. "Ma'am, we need to evacuate this area," he called out, his voice muffled but calm. "There's a serious gas leak. We can help you, but you need to put down whatever you're holding." "Help me." Sarah's laugh was hysterical now. "It's too late for help. It's too late for everything." I caught Marcus's eye and saw he was thinking the same thing I was. The gas concentration was reaching dangerous levels, and Sarah was clearly past the point of rational thought. We needed to act, and we needed to act now. "Sarah," I said, taking a half step toward her. "Remember when you first started at the company? You were so passionate about making buildings safer, about protecting people. That person is still in there somewhere." For a split second, her expression softened. That was before I learned how the world really works. Before I realized that integrity is just another word for being naive. "No," I said firmly. "Integrity is what separates us from people like Morrison. It's what Janet died for. Don't let her death be meaningless." The detonator trembled in Sarah's hand. Behind her, I could see the firefighters communicating with hand signals, but they were too far away to make a move without risking all our lives. "I can't go to prison," Sarah whispered. "I can't live with what I've done." "You can," Marcus said quietly. "People survive worse. People rebuild. But only if you choose to live." The gas smell was getting overwhelming now. My head was starting to feel light, and I realized we were running out of time in more ways than one. Even without an explosion, prolonged exposure to these fumes could kill us. Sarah seemed to realize it too. She looked around at the concrete walls, at the pipes overhead, at the faces watching her, make what might be the last decision of her life. "I'm sorry," she said, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she sounded like the colleague I used to respect. "I'm so sorry for everything." Her finger moved toward the button, and I knew I had one last chance to reach her. "Sarah, wait. There's something else you need to know about the gas mixture." She paused, looking at me with suspicion and hope warring in her eyes. "What?" I took a deep breath, knowing that what I said next would determine whether any of us walked out of here alive. The words tumbled out of me before I could fully think them through, but somehow I knew they were right. "The gas mixture down here. It's not just a simple leak. Janet discovered that Morrison had been cutting corners on the safety systems for years. The ratios are all wrong." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" My mind raced, pulling together fragments of conversations I'd had with Janet before she died, technical details I'd only half understood at the time. "The detonator you're holding, it's designed for standard natural gas concentrations. But what's filling this basement is a cocktail of industrial gases from the faulty systems upstairs. The ignition point is completely different." "You're lying," Sarah said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. "No, I'm not. Janet showed me the readings before she died. She was trying to document everything Morrison had done wrong. That detonator might not even work with these gas levels, or worse. It might cause a chain reaction that brings down the entire building." Marcus caught my eye, and I could see he understood what I was doing. Whether or not my technical explanation was accurate, I was buying us time and giving Sarah something concrete to focus on besides her guilt and desperation. "Think about it, Sarah," Marcus added quietly. "If you're wrong about the detonator, you're not just risking our lives. There are people in the buildings next to this one. Families. Children." I watched Sarah's face as this sank in. The woman who had sabotaged my presentations, who had helped Morrison cover up safety violations, was still fundamentally someone who had once cared about protecting people. That part of her hadn't completely died. "But if I don't, if I let them arrest me," her voice broke, "I'll lose everything, my career, my reputation, my freedom." "You've already lost those things," I said gently. "The question now is whether you're going to take innocent people down with you, or whether you're going to find a way to make this right." The gas fumes were making me dizzy, and I could see Marcus swaying slightly on his feet. Even the firefighter behind his protective mask seemed to be struggling with the concentration of fumes in the enclosed space. We needed resolution soon, or we'd all be unconscious before Sarah could make any decision at all. "Janet tried to do the right thing," Sarah whispered. "Look what happened to her." "Janet's death wasn't your fault," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. "But what you do next, that is your choice. You can honor her memory, or you can destroy it completely." Sarah looked down at the detonator in her hands, then back up at me. "How do I know you're not just saying this to save yourself?" "Because," I said, feeling a strange clarity cut through the fog of gas fumes and fear. 3 months ago, you cared enough about exposing the truth to sabotage my presentations. You were trying to protect people then, even if you went about it the wrong way. That person is still in there." For a long moment, the only sound was the hiss of escaping gas and our labored breathing. Sarah's finger hovered over the detonator button, and I realized that despite everything she had done to me, I genuinely didn't want to see her die. "If I surrender," she said slowly, "will you tell them about the safety violations? Will you make sure Morrison doesn't just walk away from this?" "Yes," Marcus and I said simultaneously. Sarah closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, something fundamental had shifted in her expression. She looked older, more fragile, but also somehow more real than she had in months. "I need you to promise me something else," she said, and her voice was steady now despite the tears running down her cheeks. "What?" I asked. "Promise me you'll make sure the families of everyone who got hurt because of our cover-ups get the compensation they deserve. Promise me their stories will be told." "I promise." Sarah nodded once, then slowly began to extend her hand toward me, the detonator balanced on her palm. But just as I reached out to take it, a new sound cut through the air. A sharp crack from somewhere above us, followed by a rumbling that seemed to shake the entire foundation of the building. We all looked up in horror as dust began to rain down from the ceiling, and I realized that whatever structural damage had caused the gas leak in the first place was getting worse. The sound came again, a deep, resonant crack that seemed to originate from the very bones of the building. I watched in horror as a spider web of hairline fractures spread across the concrete ceiling above us, releasing a steady shower of dust and debris that caught in our hair and made the already toxic air even harder to breathe. Sarah's hand, still extended toward me with the detonator, began to tremble violently. Not from fear, I realized, but from the vibrations running through the floor beneath our feet. The building was literally falling apart around us. "We need to get out of here now," Marcus said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. He took a step toward us, then stumbled as another rumble shook the foundation. A chunk of concrete the size of a dinner plate crashed down just inches from where he stood. The firefighter behind his mask was frantically speaking into his radio, though I couldn't make out the words over the increasing groans and creaks of failing infrastructure. He gestured urgently toward the exit, but Sarah seemed frozen in place, caught between her desire to surrender the detonator and her terror at the collapsing world around us. "Sarah, give me your hand," I said, reaching out further. The gas fumes were making everything feel dreamlike and distant, but the falling debris was all too real. A piece of rebar protruded from the fresh crack above us, twisted and bent like a broken bone. She looked up at the deteriorating ceiling, then back at me. "What if it goes off when the building collapses? What if I drop it?" "You won't drop it," I said, though my own hands were shaking now. "And we're not going to let this building collapse with us in it." But even as I spoke the words, I could see that we might not have a choice. The structural damage was accelerating, each new crack spawning 3 more, each rumble deeper and more ominous than the last. Whatever had caused the initial gas leak, probably the same corporate cost-cutting that had led to so many other safety violations, had compromised the building's integrity beyond repair. Marcus moved closer to us, his face pale but determined. "Sarah, listen to me. You said you wanted to honor Janet's memory. Janet wouldn't want you to die down here, and she wouldn't want to take innocent people with you. Give us the detonator, and let's get out of here together." "Together?" Sarah's laugh was bitter, almost lost in the sound of more concrete hitting the floor. "After everything I've done to both of you? After I destroyed your presentations, sabotaged your work, made your life hell for months?" "Yes, together," I said firmly. The words surprised me even as I spoke them, but I realized I meant them completely. Because none of this started with malice. It started with you trying to do the right thing in the worst possible way. A larger piece of ceiling crashed down, this one close enough that I felt the impact through the soles of my feet. The firefighter was practically shouting into his radio now, and I caught fragments about structural collapse and immediate evacuation. We had minutes at most before this entire section of the building came down on top of us. Sarah's eyes met mine, and for the first time in months, I saw the colleague I had once respected looking back at me. Not the desperate saboteur who had made my professional life a nightmare, but the woman who had stayed late helping new employees learn the system, who had brought homemade soup when people were sick, who had genuinely cared about doing good work. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, and her voice broke on the words. "I'm so sorry for what I did to you. I thought if I could just make Morrison's data look unreliable, if I could force a review of the safety protocols." "I know," I said softly. "I understand now, and I forgive you." The building shuddered again, more violently this time, and suddenly Sarah was moving. She pressed the detonator firmly into my palm, her fingers cold and steady despite everything. "Get that to the authorities. Make sure they understand what Morrison was hiding. Make sure Janet didn't die for nothing." I closed my fingers around the device, feeling its weight. Not just the physical weight, but the weight of all the lives it could have taken. All the truth it represented. All the responsibility it carried. "We'll make sure together. All of us." But as we turned toward the exit, following the firefighter's urgent gestures, the loudest crack yet split the air above us. I looked up to see a section of ceiling the size of a small car beginning to separate from the rest, hanging by what looked like a few steel support beams and gravity. And it was directly between us and the only way out. The firefighter didn't hesitate. "Back wall now!" he shouted, grabbing Sarah's arm and pulling her toward what looked like a solid concrete barrier. "Emergency exit behind the false panel." I clutched the detonator tighter and followed, Morrison stumbling beside me as another violent tremor shook the building. The sound of grinding metal and cracking concrete was deafening now, punctuated by the ominous groaning of structural supports pushed beyond their limits. The firefighter's gloved hands found what looked like seamless wall, but I could see now that it was actually a cleverly disguised panel. He threw his shoulder against it, and it swung inward to reveal a narrow maintenance corridor I'd never known existed. "Emergency egress," he panted, waving us through. "Building code requirement from the renovation 5 years ago. Leads directly to the parking garage." Sarah went first, then Morrison, his face pale and drawn. I was about to follow when the ceiling section above us gave one final, decisive crack. The firefighter's hand slammed into my back, shoving me through the opening just as tons of concrete and steel crashed down exactly where we'd been standing moments before. The maintenance corridor was barely wide enough for 2 people, dimly lit by battery-powered emergency strips that cast everything in an eerie yellow glow. The sound of destruction was muffled here, but still terrifyingly present, vibrating through the walls and floor beneath our feet. "Keep moving," the firefighter urged from behind me. This whole section could go any minute. We half ran, half stumbled through the corridor, our footsteps echoing oddly in the confined space. I could hear Sarah ahead of me, her breathing ragged, and Morrison muttering what sounded like prayers under his breath. The detonator felt like it was burning a hole in my palm. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, we emerged through another concealed panel into the familiar concrete expanse of the underground parking garage. The air here was thick with dust and the acrid smell of smoke, but it was blessedly cooler and felt infinitely safer than the collapsing building above us. Sarah immediately sank down onto the concrete, putting her head in her hands. Morrison leaned heavily against a support pillar, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. The firefighter was already speaking into his radio again, coordinating with teams outside. I looked down at the detonator in my hands, its simple red button now seeming almost anticlimactic after everything we'd been through. Such a small thing to have caused such chaos, to have nearly cost so many lives. "Sarah," I said quietly, crouching down beside her. "We need to know how many more of these there might be. How extensive was Morrison's operation?" She looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed, but clearer than I'd seen them in months. "The manufacturing data goes back 3 years. At least 40,000 units in circulation, maybe more. The safety recalls were supposed to happen in phases, but Morrison kept delaying them, claiming the field reports were inconclusive." Morrison pushed himself away from the pillar, his voice barely above a whisper. "The quarterly reports. I buried 6 separate incident reports in the quarterly summaries. Made them look like isolated equipment failures instead of systematic design flaws." "6 incidents," Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength. "Janet was the 7th. That's when I couldn't stay quiet anymore. That's when I started trying to expose the pattern through your presentations. The weight of it all hit me fresh. 7 people hurt, possibly killed, because of corporate cover-ups and buried safety reports. And Sarah had been carrying this knowledge alone for months, watching Morrison manipulate data and delay recalls while more people got hurt." "The backup servers," Morrison said suddenly, straightening up. "Everything's backed up to the regional office servers. Even if my local files are compromised, they'll have complete records going back years. Financial projections, cost-benefit analyses, everything." The firefighter finished his radio communication and turned back to us. "Building's stable for now, but the top 3 floors are a total loss. Bomb squads requesting immediate access to any information about additional devices." I held up the detonator. "This is the only one Sarah made. But we have information about a much bigger safety cover-up that led to this situation." "Good, because there's a federal task force assembling upstairs that's going to want to hear every detail." He paused, looking at each of us in turn. "You're all going to be key witnesses in what looks like a major corporate fraud case." Sarah stood up slowly, brushing dust off her clothes. "I have copies of everything: financial records, safety reports, email chains showing the deliberate delays. I've been documenting Morrison's actions for months." "And I can provide authentication," Morrison said quietly. "I won't pretend I'm not facing serious legal consequences, but I'll cooperate fully with the investigation. Janet deserved better than what happened to her." The firefighter nodded grimly. "That's what the task force will want to hear. But first, we need to get you all topside for medical evaluation." As we began walking toward the garage exit, I found myself beside Sarah. The woman who had made my professional life a nightmare for months, who had systematically sabotaged my work and made me question my own competence, but also the woman who had been trying, in her desperately misguided way, to save lives. "I still don't understand why you targeted me specifically," I said. "If Morrison was the one covering things up, why destroy my presentations?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment as we walked. "Because you were good at what you did. Too good. When I fed you Morrison's manipulated data, you made it look compelling and professional. Your presentations were so polished, so convincing, that they were actually helping Morrison sell the cover-up to upper management. The irony wasn't lost on me. My professional competence, the very thing I'd been so proud of, had inadvertently become part of the problem. So, you made me look incompetent to prevent me from being too competent. I thought if I could just discredit the data sources, if I could make management question the reliability of Morrison's reports, they'd order an independent review. I never meant for it to go on so long, or for you to suffer the way you did." We reached the exit ramp leading up to street level. where I could see emergency vehicles and flashing lights through the glass doors. The real world was waiting for us up there. Investigators, lawyers, reporters, and all the complicated legal and professional consequences of what had happened today. The funny thing is, Sarah continued, watching you handle my sabotage over these past months, seeing how you kept fighting to do good work, even when everything seemed to be going wrong, that's when I realized you were exactly the kind of person who would want to know the truth. I should have just told you everything from the beginning. Would I have believed you? I asked honestly. Maybe not immediately, but you would have investigated. You would have asked the right questions instead of me having to create chaos to get attention. The firefighter pushed open the doors to the outside world, and we were immediately hit by the controlled chaos of an active emergency scene. Fire trucks, police cars, federal vehicles with government plates, and what looked like a mobile command center had transformed the usually quiet corporate plaza into something resembling a disaster movie set. "Remember," the firefighter said as we approached the command center, "you're witnesses, not suspects. Tell them exactly what happened, exactly what you know. The truth is going to be your best protection in whatever comes next." But as we walked toward the cluster of officials waiting to interview us, I noticed Morrison had gone very pale, and Sarah kept looking over her shoulder at the damaged building behind us. The weight of the detonator in my hand seemed to have transferred itself to the air around us, heavy with unspoken consequences. Because while we had survived the immediate crisis, we were walking into something potentially much more dangerous. The moment when all the secrets, all the cover-ups, all the months of sabotage and deception would be laid bare in front of people with the power to determine the rest of our lives. And I wasn't entirely sure any of us were prepared for what that truth might cost us. The federal agent who approached us looked tired, like she'd been pulled from another case to handle whatever this had become. She introduced herself simply as Agent Chen and gestured toward a mobile interview trailer that had been set up in the parking lot. "We'll need to speak with each of you separately," she said, her voice professional but not unkind. "Standard procedure for situations like this." Morrison stepped forward, his shoulders squared in a way I recognized from board meetings. "Agent Chen, I want to be clear that Ms. Rodriguez here prevented what could have been a catastrophic situation. Whatever questions you have about the financial irregularities my company has been covering up, she's not responsible for any of it." "Mr. Morrison," Agent Chen replied, "I appreciate the context, but let's handle this properly. We'll get everyone's full statement." Sarah looked between Morrison and me, then directly at the agent. "I need you to know that I've been sabotaging my coworkers' presentations for months. I thought I was protecting people, but I made everything worse. That needs to be in whatever report you're filing." I watched Agent Chen's expression shift slightly. She was clearly recalibrating what she'd expected this interview process to look like. "The sabotage was connected to the financial cover-up," I added. "Sarah discovered the problems months ago and was trying to expose them, but she went about it by making my work look unreliable instead of just telling me what she'd found." Agent Chen held up a hand. "I can see this is going to be more complicated than a simple building evacuation report. Mr. Morrison, you mentioned financial irregularities that your company was covering up?" Morrison nodded grimly. "Systematic manipulation of safety inspection reports, deliberately ignoring structural problems to avoid costly repairs. When Ms. Williams discovered it, instead of bringing it to me or to the authorities, she chose to wage a campaign against Ms. Rodriguez's credibility." "And you chose to participate in covering up safety violations?" Sarah shot back, some of her earlier defiance returning. "Let's not pretend your hands are clean here." "You're right," Morrison said simply. "I was trying to protect the company's reputation instead of protecting people's safety. That makes me complicit." Agent Chen was taking notes now, and I could see her realizing that what had started as an emergency evacuation was turning into a corporate fraud investigation. "The detonator," I said, pulling it from my pocket and holding it carefully. "Sarah gave this to me. She said it was connected to charges placed by whoever has been behind the cover-up. I don't know if that's true, or if pressing it actually prevented an explosion, or if this whole thing was staged to create a distraction from the financial investigation." "You think someone was planning to destroy the evidence?" Agent Chen asked. "I think someone was planning something," Morrison said slowly. "The timing is too convenient. Federal investigation gets too close, building suffers mysterious structural failure, all the files are destroyed, and the company gets to claim it was a tragic accident while collecting insurance money." Sarah stared at him. "You knew about the explosives?" "I suspected something was being planned when I got word about the federal audit. Too many people had too much to lose." Morrison looked older than I'd ever seen him. "I just didn't know how far it had already gone." Agent Chen closed her notebook. "I think we're going to need to take this conversation somewhere more secure, and we're going to need to bring in some additional resources. What you're describing isn't just corporate fraud. It's potentially domestic terrorism." The weight of that statement settled over us. Standing in the parking lot, looking back at the building where I'd worked for 3 years, where Sarah had been fighting her lonely battle against corruption, where Morrison had been trying to balance competing loyalties, it was hard to believe we'd stumbled into something this serious. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you tell us everything you know, and we figure out how deep this goes," Agent Chen said. "And Ms. Rodriguez, Mr. Morrison is right. Based on what I've heard so far, you may have prevented something much worse than financial fraud from happening today." As we walked toward the interview trailer, Sarah fell into step beside me. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for all of it. For not trusting you, for making you look bad, for putting you in the position where you had to make that choice about the detonator. I'm sorry I didn't notice you were struggling with something this big," I replied. "Maybe if I'd paid attention, instead of just being frustrated about my presentations, we could have figured this out together months ago." Morrison, walking slightly ahead of us, turned back. "We all made choices that seemed right at the time, but were probably wrong. The question now is whether we can help fix what we helped break." As we reached the trailer, I realized that despite everything that had happened, despite the sabotage and deception and fear, the three of us had somehow become a team. Not the way any of us would have chosen, but maybe the way we needed to be to get through whatever was coming next. The truth was finally going to come out, all of it, and we were going to face the consequences together.